Dear Gladden, thank you so much for the very kind invitation. Thank you so much for the very kind words, well above merits and full of exaggeration, but it feels good. I would like to also wholeheartedly welcome my dear brother from the Republic of North Macedonia, dear Timcho. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation of the Hungarian Foreign Affairs Institute, and thank you so much for coming to Budapest and address us. Your thoughts will be very valuable under the current circumstances. I'm pretty sure about that. So for the last 15 years, unfortunately, we have been faced with a tremendous set of crises. These crises have shaken the world one by one as well. And on many occasions, we have basically announced a new world order without any kind of exaggeration. In, let's say, other periods of time, such an announcement comes with a good reason once or twice in a century. In this case, it was not an exaggeration to announce a new world order on a multiple occasion only within 15 years. There have been many events which have turned our way of thinking about the world itself upside down. We should just remember the crisis of the global crisis of the financial sector, which has totally shaken the national financial and economic political strategies. Let's remember when we have been invaded by hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants around 10 years ago, with the phenomenon which has increased the significance of the fight for sovereignty and preserving our own identity. Then I'm pretty sure that no one has forgotten about the global crisis of the healthcare sector in the form of the pandemic, which made it very clear that regardless of the very highly developed technology, regardless of the very artificial intelligence, nothing is given, and we have to fight for our lives with human resources instead of technology on many occasions. And then unfortunately, we are now living in a year of wars. The war in our neighborhood in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East, two phenomena which have made it very clear that the expression global security does not exist anymore. And my dear friends, I can tell you that the announcement that a new world order is being established is valid on the very day today as well. And this new world order is being established on two bases. First, the revolution of common sense has been going on. And the second, that the European Union is getting isolated and lagging behind under the current circumstances. So let me emphasize these two aspects of the New World Order being established. When it comes to the revolution of common sense, this is now stemming from the #1 superpower of the world. As a patriotic president has been elected, the patriotic conservative way of thinking in global politics has been on the rise. And that was the right time, finally, because the world used to be suffering under the global dictatorship of the liberal mainstream, which has been saying about itself that it is the only and exclusive way of being successful, tolerant, progressive, acceptable. And whoever does not fall in line 110% with this approach has been under tremendous attacks, has been target of accusation, cornering, and lecturing. But now, with the new president in the United States, the age of normality, the age of common sense is coming back, and what has been considered so far as extreme is now becoming the mainstream. So we are coming back to the main street of history finally. What are the practical aspects of that? First of all, words and expressions like peace talks, like ceasefire, are now legitimate expressions again. Because imagine, or just remember, the last 3 years after the war in our neighborhood had broken out, whoever used these terms were immediately stigmatized. Friends of Putin, spy of the Russians, propagandist of the Kremlin. Funnily enough, nowadays, those Western European politicians are using these words on a high frequency who used to attack us for using these words and arguing for these goals for the last 3 years. What a hypocrisy. Second practical aspect, protecting the border is finally a legitimate way of thinking and a legitimate way of acting. Finally, we can leave behind the very hypocritical approach which whispered that the illegal crossing of the border is a human rights issue. No, it's not. Illegal crossing of a border between two peaceful countries is a crime and must be approached accordingly. And third, finally, we are free to say again that a family consists of a mother, father, and children. And finally, it's free to say, and put it in a constitution as well, that a human being can be either a woman or a man. And men compete with men on sporting events, and women compete with women on the sporting events. That's how natural it is, and finally we are coming back to that. This is revolution of common sense. But what about EU getting isolated and lagging behind? What's the reason for that? The reason for that is that the European Union, rather to say the institutions and the bureaucrats in Brussels, are the leaders of the pack when it comes to dividing the world into blocks again. We Hungarians, we Central Europeans, do have a very bad memory of times when the world used to be divided into blocks. We basically had been under the occupation of the communist regime for 40 years. We were oppressed by the East and totally neglected by the West. And we have lost 4 decades of our lives, an entire generation basically. And if the world is being divided into blocks again, we Central Europeans know what loss it can cause and what tremendous growth opportunities we would lose with that. Unfortunately enough, the European champion of so-called de-risking, the former German Minister of Foreign Affairs, after leaving politics returned, not in Berlin but in New York, and I'm afraid that for the upcoming 1 year the United Nations might lose its capacity and ability to serve as a platform for those even to negotiate who are in a hostile relationship. When she spoke about de-risking, I always raise the question how it comes that the global CEOs of the biggest German companies reach out to me on a weekly basis asking me to give cash incentive to their Chinese suppliers to be able to come to Hungary to be as close to the German factories as it is just possible. Look at Hungary. A German factory is being built. What is being built in the neighborhood? A Chinese factory. This is the way the global cooperation works now in global economy, and I don't think that European politics should ruin that. I would even say that yesterday, on the meeting of the energy ministers in Luxembourg, it became very obvious that the industrial cooperation between the Russian and the Western European nuclear industries is stronger than we would have thought. Look at the legal proposal which will be proposed by the European Commission most probably today, what kind of regulations it will contain about nuclear industry, and you will understand. But what is the major and most serious mistake European Union commits? It is the over-politicization and the over-ideologization of the questions of economic nature. And this brings European Union to isolation. Remember the competition among the Western European leaders during the last 8 years, the aim of which was to say the most nasty possible things on President Trump, regardless whether in office or not in office. The problem is that it is not only the Western European politicians who used to take part in this competition who remember what they said on President Trump, but President Trump does remember as well what these Western European politicians have said about him. Second, on China. Oh, sorry, back to US. When the patriotic president came to office, we have proposed to the European Commission to immediately cut the tariffs applied by the European Union against the United States industry, because the European Union used to apply 4 times higher tariffs on the American automotive industry compared to the tariffs applied by the US against the European Union automotive industry. We propose immediately to the European Commission to cut to the same level. That would have created a platform based on which successful negotiations could have taken place between the US and the European Union, and a good agreement could have been reached if the European Commission had acted on time. But the European Union has put tariffs on the Chinese electric automotive industry as well. You might remember what was the reasoning. They wanted to protect the European automotive industry. What did the representatives of the European automotive industry say? Please don't do that. Please don't protect us. But what happened? Tariffs had been introduced against the electric automotive industry of China. What happened to the economic relationships to African and Asian countries? European Union proved to be totally unsuccessful in completing negotiations about free trade agreements or investment protection agreements. Why? Because issues which have nothing to do with trade, like LGBT and gender, have been confused with trade issues. And of course, these negotiations have never ended with completed results, neither on FTAs or on investment protection agreements. Sanctions against Russia. Sanctions against Russia has destroyed the growth model of the European economy, looking back the last couple of decades, namely a combination of highly developed Western technologies and easily accessible Russian energy sources. And there's a big hypocrisy in this regard. While we have been attacked by the Western European colleagues for buying openly Russian pipeline gas, the import of Russian LNG has broken record last year. Who were the buyers? The French, the Spanish, and the Belgians. Or the biggest economy of Europe has increased its oil imports from India 11 times, while Russia has increased its oil exports to India like 70 times. Of course, coincidence, no relationship in between the two. But the biggest mistake is the politicization and the ideologization of the energy issues, because energy is the most physical issue of the world. If there's a pipeline, you can buy energy. If there's no pipeline, you cannot buy energy. Not very sophisticated, but true. And what the European Union has been doing now with the von der Leyen-Zelensky plan is increasing the prices of the energy used by Europe to skies, putting Central European countries like Hungary in a serious situation of dependency on one single route. Yesterday they spoke about sovereignty. Yes, they are violating our sovereignty very badly, because according to the European Union Basic Treaty, putting together national energy mix is a core national competence. With this new von der Leyen-Zelensky plan, they restrict this sovereignty of ours. They spoke about dependency. Yes, they are increasing our dependency as cutting energy sources from us, cutting the second largest gas interconnector and cutting one of the 2 oil delivery routes. Plus, they are increasing prices to skies of the families, increasing the bills at the end of each month to 2, 3, 4 times. This is the biggest mistake, over-politicization and over-ideologization of things which have nothing to do neither with politics nor with ideology. So the situation of Hungary is a pretty, let's say, exciting one from the perspective of global political science. Because on one hand, we are one of the leaders of the pack when it comes to the revolution of the common sense. But on the other hand, we are part of the European Union, which is getting isolated and lagging behind in global politics and global economy. So what to do? What to do to take out the profit of the positive things and not to be suffering from the negative things? Well, here we need a very smart strategy. And the name of the smart strategy is economic neutrality. And the strategy of economic neutrality has been ensuring that Hungary has been breaking the records of investments flowing to the country and exports flowing out of the country for the last 10 consecutive years, with the exception of 1 year with COVID. We have become the meeting point of the Eastern and Western investors. We are the only country in Europe, besides Germany, and one of the 3 in the world, besides Germany and China, where all 3 top German premium car makers are now having factories. We are now having the 2nd largest capacity of producing electric batteries in the world. We are going to be the 5th European country soon which produces 1 million cars per year. Last year, 31%, the year before, 44% of all Chinese investments targeting Europe have ended up in Hungary. And all this package, all this strategy of economic neutrality has ended up in continued records of FDI inflow and export outflow in and from Hungary. But this is only the economic part. What is the political part? What is the political duty? Now, we have to be aware that regardless of the fantastic changes in Washington, the attacks and pressure on us from Brussels is going to grow in the future as well. So we have to double, triple our efforts to preserve our sovereignty. What does it mean? First, we have to make sure that we're going to be left out of the war in our neighborhood in the upcoming period of time as well. The pressure to push us into this war is increasing. We are basically the only ones in Europe, with some friends like the Slovaks, who are supporting, in the European Union, who are supporting the peace plans of President Trump. We are the only ones who have been speaking openly about the need for peace talks and ceasefire for the last more than 3 years. And in the upcoming period of time, we have to make sure that we are not going to be pushed into this war. We have to make sure we're going to be left out. Second, we have to make sure that regardless of the pro-migration policy of Brussels, we're not going to let any single illegal migrant to enter the territory of Hungary from neither directions. No illegal migrants. We will keep the fence there, we will keep the 024 presence of our border guards there, and we make sure that we are the ones who make a decision whom we allow to come into this country, and we are the only ones who make the decision with whom we are ready to live together in this country. And we continue to support our families. 5% of our GDP is now being allocated for family subsidies in next year's budget, about which the Parliament is going to go into vote today. 5% of GDP, highest in the OECD area, supporting our families. We have to avoid that the pressure from Brussels ends up in a puppet government in Hungary. We need a national government, we need a patriotic government, we need a government like the one which has been fighting for national interest for the last more than 15 years. So actually, we have been carrying out, and we have to continue to carry out, a patriotic fight for freedom. And we have to make sure that this patriotic fight for freedom is not only going to be successful in Hungary, but in Europe as well. And as we have been seeing the signals, and as we have been listening to the speeches of CPAC 2 weeks ago, I think we can have some good hopes. But we even can have better hopes, because after myself, you will have the chance to listen to my dear brother and friend, Timcho. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for your kind attention.